Within weeks, there was the formation of the Air Force, which was split off from the Army Air Force. It also led, however, the development of unacknowledged special access projects, which is why Eisenhower, even though he knew about the subject on a fairly deep level, had completely lost control of it by 1961 when he left office.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
You know, because you think of generals and you think of conservatives and Republicans as being very pro-military in business, but he's talking about the illegal part of it. He's not talking about the conventional military.
But it's now the military-industrial intelligence complex that are moving bureaucratically toward establishing dominion and control over the entire democratic process in the country, and that they're waging war, invading the Middle Eastern oil fields and occupying the oil fields, attempting to establish what they themselves refer to as full spectrum dominance.
But we're going to smoke them out.
And so the public has to understand there became to be this bifurcation, this separation between legitimate national security and military operations and the deep black programs that are unacknowledged. We're talking about the black budget, the deep black, super secret, unacknowledged budget that runs in the $100 to $200 billion a year. I'm being conservative.
My 03 budget calls for more than $48 billion in new defense spending.
More money for the Pentagon when its own auditors admit the military cannot account for 25% of what it already spends.
According to some estimates, we cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions.
$2.3 trillion with a T. That's $8,000 for every man, woman, and child in America.
We're spending well over $100 million per day on classified programs that have no congressional oversight, no public scrutiny. There's no monitor of these programs. A number of these programs go directly through Congress, totally. When you start going through these documents, these programs start dropping off the radar screen. These are all classified programs within the defense budget, but they don't supply any technical information on the program.
And if people think that the Congress and the president actually have a handle on this, they're gravely mistaken. They do not. This is where we get into the structure of secrecy.
The structure of secrecy is complex and multifaceted. We've been led to believe that we live in a mostly transparent democracy, with the president at the top of the intelligence food chain, a true commander-in-chief. The reality, however, is much different.
A shadowy government with its own Air Force, its own Navy, its own fundraising mechanism, and the ability to pursue its own ideas of the national interest, free from all checks and balances, and free from the law itself.
There's secrecy that is legal, and unfortunately, where Edward Snowden made his mistake was by disclosing secrets, no matter how inappropriate it might have been that they were going on, that were being managed legally that the president and Congress and the intelligence committees knew about.
A traitor to the United States.
On the other hand, there's secrecy that is illegal. And these are the unacknowledged special access projects, USAPs, USAP for short.
What they've done is they've formed this alliance among themselves of the industry that makes money by building war machines, the military that uses the war machines and justifies them, and then the intelligence community that is not really an intelligence community, it's a covert operations community, armed with military weapons and nuclear weapons, and that they're trying to push the boundaries now of establishing their dominion in full spectrum dominance over the planet.
And in this document, first document that's on the briefing for President Obama's brief we put together that we gave to John Podesta, this document lists the compartmented operations out of the Nellis facility, what the public wrongly calls Area 51. I gave this document to the head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Tom Wilson. Now this is J2. This is the guy who puts the intelligence briefings together for the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the United States of America. And he got hold of one of these compartments and he said, "Hello, I'm Admiral Tom Wilson. I want to be read into or briefed on this project." They said, "Yes, sir, we know who you are. And you don't have a need to know. You don't have a need to know. The head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So this is where the military have been victims of the secrecy, because there are many generals and admirals and very good officers I've met with who have enormous responsibility that everyone, if you polled 1,000 people on the street, I think every single person would say something this sensitive they would know about, and if they didn't have knowledge about it, if they asked about it, they will be told. That is not true.
There are very clear efforts to engage in covert programs and to keep the knowledge of those programs away from people, even in positions of constitutional authority.
Dick Cheney, he would have a need to know. They call him Darth Cheney. We're talking about people way up in the defense industry, people who are running the skunk works, people like Ben Rich, like Kelly Johnson.
So these unacknowledged special access projects do not care what your rank and position is. They care about one thing. Will you go along with their agenda? And this is exactly what happened when I met with Lord Hill Norton.
Since my name has become connected with UFO matters in quite a big way in this country, I have frequently been asked by a person of my background, a former chief of the defense staff, a former chairman of the NATO military committee, what the reasons may be for governments wishing to cover up the facts about UFOs. That, I believe, is because governments fear that if they did disclose those facts, people would panic.
The only thing he really wanted to know was, I was head of the Ministry of Defense, head of the Military Committee for NATO, head of MI5, MI6. Why wouldn't they have told me? And I said, well, sir, with all due respect, what would you have done if you'd found out that there was a project that was illegal, engaged in assassinations, that was keeping from not only our leaders and our constitutionally required oversight, technologies and information that would enable us to have a whole new civilization on this planet without pollution or dependency on Mideast oil or what have you. And he says, I wouldn't have stood for it for a bloody minute. And he was just in a rage about it. I said, that's why they didn't tell you.
Several U.S. presidents are on record talking about the UFO mystery.
Yeah, Presidents Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan both had UFO sightings of their own, but the current presidential campaign might be the first in which UFO disclosure has been championed by a major party candidate.
When we had your husband, President Clinton, on this show, he said, I asked him about UFOs in Area 51, and if he looked in, because if I was president, that's the first thing I do. I go right into those files and see what was going on.
Right.
And he said that he did do that.
Yes.
And that he didn't find anything.
Well, I'm gonna do it again.
Yeah, why not?
Right? And you know, there's a new name. It's unexplained aerial phenomenon.
The actual being of UFO and ET phenomena that we're aware of today.
I am convinced that UFOs exist because I've seen one. President Jimmy Carter.
When President Carter was elected, I was the legal counsel for the Jesuit National Headquarters in Washington, D.C. He called the director of the Central Intelligence Agency, George H.W. Bush, to a meeting and asked Bush if, as the director of Central Intelligence, would give to Carter, as the president-elect, all the information he had on the potential existence of extraterrestrial life and the issue of whether or not any of the UFO vehicles might be vehicles from another star system. And George H.W. Bush refused to give him the information. Said he'd have to go to Congress and get Congress to have the Congressional Research Service at the Library of Congress declassify it to get it to him if he was going to get it. That's a true story.
In some of these cases, absolutely, the president has no need to know because he's a temporary employee. He's strictly a temporary employee. He does not have a need to know on some of these deeper black programs within the Skunk Works, within the Boeing Phantom Works, and also within the Black Widow Group of Northrop.
Congressional Research Service of the Library of Congress, their Science and Technology Division, based on all the information classified and declassified that they have reviewed, their projection was that there were at least from 2 to 6 other highly intelligent, highly technologically developed, but non-human civilizations just in our Milky Way galaxy.
There was deep concern that something this important would be kept out of the briefings for the president. my sort of coming of age, which was hard. Anyway, it's hard talking about this. I'm trying to say, I was a young doctor, asked to do something like this. Sorry. I'm a doctor in an ER, taking care of shootings and stabbings and car wrecks. And I'm being asked to brief the CIA director on stuff because he and the president are being lied to? What? You know, are you... I said, are you fucking crazy? It was terrible. Frankly, it was devastating. Initially, I have to admit, the CIA director, I thought, to be honest with you, that he was sort of picking my brain to find out what I knew, as opposed to really not knowing. By the time the 3-hour meeting was over, it was quite clear that the emperor had no clothes. He later denied the meeting had happened for a briefing. This is a wonderful thing. Now, people say, how could he write this letter basically saying that this meeting and what I said about it was a distortion of the truth? I said, because he didn't realize there was a record beforehand. And thank God I saved the document.